I unearthed 10 terrifying small-town horror stories that will haunt your nightmares. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill climbed my spine, and dread wrapped around my heart like a vice. Here I was, just a regular person going about my everyday life. Waking up, sipping coffee, heading to the job I thought was normal. Until that night, the air was thick, heavy with a sense of something wrong. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, as if they were trying to avoid the glow of my lamp. The whispers began softly, mere echoes, like a breeze rustling through dried leaves. But they grew louder, colder. I could smell damp earth, a rotting scent that gnawed at my stomach. Everyone in town knew the old church at the end of Maple Street. The one that was abandoned, long forgotten. But what they didn't talk about were the strange occurrences. The flickering lights at odd hours. The sounds of footsteps when no one was there. I could feel that tension wrapping around me. A sense of being watched, hunted. Then, it happened. A picture on my wall tilted, as if someone had nudged it. My breath quickened. I glanced towards the window, knowing full well there was no one outside. Yet, the shadows moved. Something in me tensed, ready to flee. I heard a soft thud from the darkened hallway. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs. Hello. My voice shook, barely more than a whisper. Silence swallowed me whole, the air suffocating. Then came the sound, a low crack, like bones snapping. Terror flooded my veins. I darted back, my instincts screaming for me to get out, but the door slammed shut. The darkness deepened. Suddenly, I saw it. A figure tall, shrouded in black loomed at the edge of my vision. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't move. They stepped closer, the whispers now screaming in my mind. Help, me. That's when I realized. I might not be alone after all. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stumbled backward, heart racing against the terror gripping my chest. The figure remained, a dark silhouette with a twisted face hidden beneath its hood. It was the kind of darkness that seeped into your bones, like frost in winter, freezing every rational thought. The whispers intensified, intertwining with each pulse of fear as they echoed beyond my understanding. Help, me. Panic surged through me, a desperate need to flee this malevolent presence. But the door, my only means of escape, mocked me. I clawed at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Quandaries of why I hadn't just left sooner crashed over me like waves, leaving me gasping for air beneath their weight. Stay, the figure hissed, voice slipping like slime through my mind. You can't leave yet. My body was a prison of fright. I breathed in deep, hoping to summon some semblance of courage, but all I could inhale was the rancid scent of mildew and decay. The figure took another step forward, and the shadows danced like marionettes pulled by unseen strings. The air crackled with a static charge, humming, making my skin prickle. The whispers morphed into a chorus of sobs, anguished cries that bounced off the walls of my home. Help, it echoed, laced with pain. As I felt warmth pooling beneath my skin, a realization struck me. The whispers weren't just the figure's, it felt like a multitude of voices sharing the same burden, the same dread. They all wanted help. Who were they? What had they endured? I tried to find my own voice amidst the cacophony, to ask them what I could do, but it escaped me. I could hear footsteps now. Heavy, muted thuds reverberating from the direction of the old church. The walls trembled, vibrating under an unseen force, a prelude to something horrific. The figure retreated slightly, allowing a shimmering light to seep through the darkness, revealing more than just its shadowy outline. In that moment, I recognized the familiar lines of the faces entwined within the darkness, people I often passed on the street. Their mournful eyes bored into me, pleading. "Don't leave us," they whispered in unison, as if the shadows had fused their despair into one haunting lament. That I turned toward the sound of the footsteps, the dread twisting like a knife in my gut. The church, an eerie beacon against the night, glowed slightly, drawing my gaze instead of my gut feeling to run. Something was happening there. Something wrong, and then, as if sensing my thoughts, the figure lunged at me with a predatory grace. In an instant, I felt icy fingers grasp my wrist. An electric shock jolted me, and a rush of visions cascaded through my mind, visions of the church, dark ceremonies, faces twisted in agony. A heart-wrenching scream echoed, and I realized it wasn't just in my mind, it was a real cry, real anguish. Desperation fueled my fight. Summoning whatever strength remained, I wrenched my wrist free and bolted for the door, feeling invisible hands grasping at my back, seeking to pull me into the depths of despair. Surging forward, I flung the door open with a deafening crash, the frigid night air slapping my cheeks. But the world had shifted. An alley I had known my entire life now harbored something unfamiliar, paths and shadows intertwined like vines, contorting into grotesque shapes. Silence enveloped me, heavy enough to choke. The town, a place I thought I understood, now seemed a labyrinth of nightmares, pulsating with a malevolence that made my skin crawl, and then, just as darkness threatened to consume my thoughts, the ground trembled beneath me. I stumbled as a deafening crack split the silence, echoing through the streets. Looking back, I saw the figures materialize, chasing me with a haunting malaise, twisting and writhing with an insatiable hunger. The church was alive behind them, its stone facade shaking with anticipation, beckoning me to step back. In the distance, something burst through the night, a figure draped in rippling shadows. Its face my own twisted likeness, gnarled and corrupt, grinned with malice. I froze. What was happening? What did they want from me? And for the first time that night, the whispers stopped. The silence that replaced them felt way more terrifying. Then, in one horrifying moment of realization, I understood, those voices weren't asking for help. They were warning me of a fate far worse if I didn't turn back. But it was too late. My own reflection lunged forward, hands reaching for me. "Help me," echoed one last time, filling the empty street as shadows enveloped me, pulling me under their depths. As darkness pressed against my consciousness, I felt a single, chilling thought, a truth that shattered my sanity. I wasn't the one they needed to save. I was the one they wanted. The shadows clawed at me, cold and insatiable, as I was dragged toward the heart of the darkness. My reflection loomed closer, its eyes glistening with a madness I never wanted to understand. The moment frozen in time, I was confronted by something that was both familiar and utterly abhorrent. It beckoned me with a skeletal hand, a twisted caricature of my own being, as if it held the secrets of every terrible choice I had ever made. "Join us," it rasped, voice like gravel crunching underfoot. "You've already begun to unravel the thread. Why not embrace it?" There was an agonizing pull, blurring the lines of who I really was. A sinking dread washed over me, the kind that wrapped around my heart like an anaconda waiting to suffocate. I could feel the whispers inside me, the collective sorrow of many souls who had strayed, longing for the light but tethered to this wretched existence. "No!" I screamed, my voice splintering against the darkness, but the cacophony of cries surged anew, filling the air with a dissonance that quaked within my bones. "Please! Let me go!" Like a rubber band released, I found myself thrust back into the alley, the grip of shadows loosening just enough for panic to prevail. I stumbled away from the figure, regaining my footing, but the faces in the darkness morphed into grotesque masks, a swirling kaleidoscope of terror. I was lost in a maze of despair. The alley stretched endlessly, each turn leading to familiar echoes that haunted my mind. The church loomed larger, pulsing like a living thing. It silently beckoned, its stained glass windows depicting scenes of torment that danced in the undulating shadows. As I hurried along the alleyway, an unnatural wind snaked through, carrying with it a pungent stench, the scent of blood mingled with burnt offerings. Ahead, the ground erupted as if the earth itself conspired to prevent my escape. A fissure split the cobblestones, spewing forth a mist that writhed like a sentient being. From the depths, I was met with more figures, face down with the souls condemned to this fate, their mouths opening wide in unison as if rehearsing the very words that might rip the last strings of sanity from my mind. "Look closer." Their voices cried, sharp and accusatory. "You're one of us now." I turned, stumbling back, breath hitching in my throat as every flicker of movement drew the attention of the spectral forms flooding forward. They didn't just want to warn me, they wanted to claim me, body and soul. I had unwittingly become entangled in a web of agonizing regret and lost dreams. Racing towards the church, I felt the shadows creeping near, wrapping around me like serpents yearning for warmth, seeking to pull me back. But the door, an invitation or a cursed threshold, stood ajar, light spilling forth like a promise I dared not trust. Inside, I could hear laughter that twisted into despair, a carnival of tormented souls reveling in their shared suffering. Suddenly, a crash echoed from behind me. I glanced back, adrenaline surging through every fiber of my being. A giant form loomed, obscuring the moonlight, a figure shaped by the very darkness that chased me. It was an amalgamation of all the horrors I had faced, a monstrous entity woven from the despair of my own choices. It moved with a grace that belied its size, its intent clear, to reach out and ensnare. With a primal scream, I dashed through the doorway. The moment I crossed the threshold, it slammed shut behind me with a deafening finality, leaving me in an echoing silence. I stumbled into an empty nave pulled taut with expectations that hung thick like incense in the air. Rows of rotting pews faced a darkened altar, upon which lay an ornate chalice filled with a deep, crimson liquid. The occasional flicker of candlelight revealed shadows moving within the gargoyle-laden walls, watching me with predatory anticipation. "Help!" I whispered, feeling the weight of the voices swarm around me. They were here, in this place of worship turned prison, where they demanded justice, where I was to be judged. Then it happened. The presence shifted. A figure emerged from the dark, wearing the vestments of a clergy but their features obscured by a mask of sin and suffering. It stepped closer, a calm grace juxtaposed against the violent thrumming of my racing heart. "You've trespassed, but all is not lost," it murmured, voice smooth and beckoning. "You can still choose to join them. Relinquish your past, embrace your darkness." My chest tightened, breath stuttering out in clouded panic. The ravenous phantoms gathered around me, their whispers rising in an anguished crescendo, exuding a sense of unfulfilled longing, and then, I felt a strange warmth emanating from the chalice, luring me into its depths with the promise of absolution. The figure extended an arm, inviting me to partake. In that instant, a deafening roar erupted from behind the walls, a din of unspeakable agony. The shadows convulsed, the whispers crescending into a frenzied clamor as a singular voice resounded, "Choose." I hesitated, and in that hesitation, the church shuddered, the walls cracking as they quaked under the weight of my indecision. I felt the room tilt, the floorboards splintering beneath me, pulling apart, as the specters began to pull me downward. My pulse thrummed in time with the chaos surrounding me, a frantic heartbeat against fate, and then, as I grappled with the choices crumbling around me, the mask of the figure before me fractured, revealing not just the horrors of my past, but my face twisted in overwhelming despair. "Help me," echoed in unison from the shadows, and for the first time, I understood. The true question spiraled within my mind as the floor fell away, exposing a gaping abyss, a chasm of darkness, of hollowness, of surrender. Would I save myself, or would I finally give in to the darkness that sought to consume me? And then, with everything around me collapsing, I knew fate was about to decide. The ground beneath me gave way with a deafening crack, a herald of calamity that sent shards of wood and stone spiraling into the air. I tumbled into the void, grasping for something, anything to halt my descent into the abyss that promised eternal night. The weight of regret pressed down, every choice I had ever made congealing into a heavy, suffocating cloak. As I fell, the echoes of the church faded into a chilling silence, swallowed by the unending dark. I landed not on solid ground but upon a surface smooth and cold, like glass, reflecting the very chaos I was desperately trying to escape. The walls of the chasm shimmered with a light born from dark memories, swirling images swirling like ink in water, mocking me with each blink of my eyes. A cacophony of voices enveloped me, a discordant choir of ones I had lost, those I had wronged, and shadows long since departed this world. They beckoned with elongated hands, reaching through the glass, their mouths opening, no sound emerging except a palpable, suffocating despair that clawed at me like fingernails against raw flesh. "Join us," they breathed, their breath as cold as the grave. "You cannot escape what you are." Overwhelmed by their sorrow, I pressed my palms against the glassy surface, my breath fogging the reflective void. The panic surged anew, I felt the remnants of my resolve flickering like a dying flame. But then, from the depths of that darkness, a figure began to form, a shade enveloped in swirling particles of black mist. It floated upwards, unfurling like petals of a night-blooming flower. As it drew nearer, I bitterly recognized the familiar features. The eyes, sunken and hollow, reflecting only despair and rage, belonged to someone I had once adored. My heart seized as the face revealed itself to me in full, my sister, lost to the malevolence of my decisions. "Why did you leave me?" Her voice emerged not as a whisper, but as a guttural snarl, filled with an anguish stronger than I had ever known. "You turned away when I needed you most." Each word struck like a dagger aimed at the softest parts of my soul, threatening to tear open old wounds that still dripped with every quiet regret. I stammered, tried to speak, but the words fell away like dead leaves in autumn. An insatiable grief festered, pulling me asunder, weaving through the glass, merging my essence with hers. "Your time is now," my sister intoned, lowering her head, her voice becoming a chilling echo of the many lost. "The darkness wishes to consume, but your choice remains. Join us, bring others to our fold, or suffer eternally alone." In that moment, I could see them, faces old and new, those I had seen before in the church, now trapped in an endless cycle of torment. Their eyes blazed with suffering and longing, all wanting to drag me down with them. They were no longer just figments of remorse, they were manifestations of every sin and shame, bound by my refusal to face the truth. The walls pressed closer, and the glass surface warped with each moment of hesitation. The figures reached for me, hands twisting and turning into grotesque shapes, eyes filled with the fire of accusation. The warmth of my sister enveloped me. Was it compassion or a trap? I could no longer tell. Suddenly, the glass began to crack beneath the weight of my despair, fissures spiderwebbing outward, a cacophony of breaking memories resonating in the air. I knew I had to choose. Pain lashed at me as threads of grief pulled taut, dragging me toward the center of anguish, but the light flickered above, a beacon of hope tantalizingly out of reach. "Don't you see?" A new voice threaded through the chaos. It was sweet and seductive, a whisper laced with promises. "You do not have to endure this. You can escape. You can set them free, but in doing so, you must become one of us." I felt the presence of the entity coiling around me, its essence intertwining with my panic. It offered an exit, but the cost loomed large. I could shatter the glass, smash through to another truth, but what lay beyond that everlasting horizon? The figures urged me on, their haunting lament evolving into a symphony of pain that tugged at my heartstrings. "We will always be with you. We will not let you go." As the glass splintered fully, a blinding flash erupted in a kaleidoscope of color that blurred reality. The hands grasped at me harder, desperation clawed at my lungs. I fought, breath shuddering, heart racing, standing on the precipice of eternal choices, with my mind racing and heart hammering. I made my decision, flinging my hands outward to shatter what tethered me to my past. And just as the glass fragments scattered like stars in an explosion of light, I heard a final, haunting whisper, a siren's call that resonated with my deepest fear, a promise that broke the air like thunder: "Welcome to the darkness, forever." As the light dimmed, I fell deeper, swallowed whole by my own choices, realizing I hadn't escaped. I had willingly chosen to plunge into madness, into who I truly was meant to be. The darkness enveloped me, whispering promises of what I could become, when suddenly, something cold and hard gripped my ankle. I was not alone in this ending. 1,000 claws reached from the depths, catching me in a downward spiral, dragging me back toward an unfathomable horror I had yet to imagine. I screamed, but even the sound fell away, drowned in the unforgiving void, leaving only an echo laden with understanding my fate was sealed as I was pulled into the vastness of oblivion. The sensation of my body wrenching backward yanked me from the depths of despair, crashing me against unseen rocks hidden beneath the murky waters of this ethereal abyss I had momentarily embraced. Dark water splashed around me, cruel tendrils grasping at my limbs like serpents, attempting to pull me under, further into the heart of this monstrous chasm where the past and present fused into a single source of anguish. I gasped, drawing in air that tasted of iron and decay, the taste igniting memories of places not yet lost but long forgotten. The darkness, thick and suffocating, wrapped around my throat like a noose, constricting with each frenzied heartbeat, reminding me that escape was an illusion, an inhumane trick played by the shadows. Amongst the chaos, I felt something shift behind me, the water swirling with an unnatural energy. An object, or perhaps a creature, slithered near, catching the corner of my eye, a flash of pale skin glistening viscerally beneath the growing shadows. I gasped anew as my survival instinct clashed with dread, causing sharp heat to pulse through my veins. With every desperate thrust of my arms, I hoped to propel myself upward, back towards any semblance of light. But the thing lurking just beyond my reach refused to let go. Its grip tightened around my ankle like a vice, dragging me deeper into the void. I twisted my body, preparing to confront whatever hunted me, when a wave of luminescence broke the shadows, illuminating the horrific scene above. Shadows moved in unison, a congregation of forlorn souls wrapped in grief that wove specters of lost hope. They blinked into existence, hovering inches above the surface of a vast lake of darkness, their bodies flickering like distant flames. Faces emerged from the turbulent waters, twisted in eternal agony, ghostly visages connecting with a silver thread, each thread anchored unwaveringly to my heart. My sister's face appeared amid the chaos, a contorted grimace of betrayal and fury etched across her once familiar features. "You brought this upon us!" she screamed, her voice mingling with a chorus of wails that reverberated through the very fabric of this hell. I trembled, shouting back, "I couldn't save you. I tried." But the haunted eyes of the lost drilled into my soul, a reflection of every horror I had ever ignored flashing behind their almost translucent irises, reminders of pain, each wretched encounter now materializing like venomous phantoms, enveloping me in their malediction. The thing pulling me downward grew restless, its scales shimmering, and suddenly I saw it, a liquid mass writhed beneath me, a pair of wretched, hollow eyes glinting as it emerged, revealing rows of jagged teeth set in an insatiable grin. It wasn't merely a creature, it was a grotesque collage forsaken from the countless souls dwelling here, a predator of despair, born from sin. The whispers crescendoed, the anguished cries intensifying, blending into an unholy symphony as I felt myself being preyed upon, weakened by every cry of regret and desolation that echoed around me. The enormity of my failure pressed heavily against my chest, squeezing every ounce of defiance from my soul. I was nothing but fodder, a bearer of the burdens they cast upon me for my transgressions. Suddenly, the silver threads binding us began to snap one by one, each jarring sound ringing like a death knell. I thought of my sister and the others. Would they be set free, or would I only serve to damn them further? My heart raced as the creature drew nearer, its maw stretching wider as hungry shadows enveloped its form, poised to feast upon my torment. That in a moment of frantic clarity, I fought against the pull, wrenching myself from its grasp. The lake surged upwards, crashing against my body as the remnants of memories sprinted past, desperate to hold on but too entangled in the morass of horror to reach me. My sister's visage flickered once more, and though my resolve shattered as I screamed, "I am sorry," it echoed fruitlessly as hands grasped blindly behind me, shadows dragging me again toward the unfathomable depth. With a final, chilling roar, the monster surged forth, mouth unhinging to reveal what lay inside, a swirling tempest of memories, filled with echoes of every moment left unaddressed and every emotion left unspoken. I was but a vessel for their wrath, an offering to its ravenous appetite. A darkness more profound than night consumed my vision entirely. I fought desperately to break free of this endless descent, but the edges of my sanity frayed, thread by thread, as the maw opened to swallow me whole. The final scream left my lips a shriek that ruptured every boundary, telling a tale of loss and horror meant only for the damned. In that moment, as I was engulfed by the weights of the abyss, clarity struck. They didn't want me to suffer alone. And just as the jaws of the beast sealed, I felt an overwhelming surge of not just fear, but guilt that twisted deep within me, locks unraveling like strands of a weave, uncovering a truth I hadn't yet grasped. "Why don't you join us?" The darkness cooed, wrapping around me, pulling me closer into its embrace, and then, in the network of souls yearning to escape, a single voice broke through, a voice I recognized, both vehement and soothing. "You must choose, one of us must be freed." Before I could register anything further, the anticipation shattered like glass and a choice loomed before me, liberation or damnation, a sacrifice far greater than my own. I surged in an unseen current, spiraled through the suffocating darkness, my scream swallowed by an abyss that pulsed with ancient malice. The voice, haunting yet familiar, echoed loudly in my mind, reverberating, demanding an answer as I plummeted into the void. The shimmering threads that anchored the forsaken souls began intertwining around me, serpentine-like, tightening with a sense of urgency, as if they understood the weight of the decision thrust upon me. I could feel each whisper, each lament, thrumming like a heartbeat within this darkness, and I realized that they craved release, a final exhalation that had eluded them. "Who do I choose?" I wailed into the encroaching shadows, panic rising as I envisioned the faces glistening with despair, sorrowful eyes that pierced through the cosmic weight around me. Each ghostly likeness represented regrets I couldn't face, memories I thought hidden. The visions blurred, morphing into a cacophony of the past, manifesting the moments where I faltered. "Save me!" a voice cried, then another, unified in their desperation. The fear was palpable, it wrapped around me tighter, squeezing. In the surge of identities, I caught a glimpse of my sister's gentle face, an apparition of innocence before the abyss swallowed her whole, before our world twisted into this grotesque nightmare. Instinctively, I reached for her, and in that very motion, the threads pulled taut, snapping like tiny glass strings, unleashing an energy that rattled within me. I felt the shadows' grasp weaken, retreating as if recoiling from a light they could not extinguish. But the glow was never enough, never strong enough to pierce the suffocating darkness completely. With renewed will, I fought against the grip of despair. "I choose." My breath was a fraying whisper, yet I could not finish the thought, the words curling in my throat like smoke, dissipating into the void. The creature drew closer, its presence pushing against me like a feral beast hungry for flesh, dripping with shadows that clung damp and cold. Its hollow eyes gleamed with malicious delight, reveling in my torment, the ache of indecision threading through my chest. "Choose," it coaxed, a slithering hiss winding through the chaos. "Stop!" I screamed, flailing against the current of despair that tried to sweep me into submission. "I refuse. I want to let you take me." And there it was again, the flickering, wavering lights, the faces hovering like candles on the brink of extinguishing the memories of those I had let down. I felt the tugging insistence of guilt tightening around my heart in an unbreakable vice. What if their anguish became mine to bear? Did I have the strength to shoulder the weight of another soul, to plunge deeper into the shadows to save my sister? A response came from the depths, resonating with authority. "Only then will you know true horror, and true release." The specters looked on, anticipating, eyes aflame with hope, beckoning me to decide. Their prison was my making, yet they wanted my soul as ransom. But before I could unearth the depths of my choice, the creature lunged forward, its gaping maw more dreadful than I could ever have imagined, unveiling a vortex of swirling forms, a tempest of emotions, years of lost moments, torment, sorrow encased within its insatiable hunger. As I felt the heat of fury emanating from the shadows, so close it tickled the edges of my soul, I understood in that blistering instant that this was not merely a choice, it was a reckoning. "I will save them." I blurted, "But whom?" The air chilled, an anguished scream erupted from behind me, vibrating through the liquid void. I turned to find more faces contorting into expressions of terror, one voice rising above the rest in the frantic storm of madness: my sister, her eyes wide, pleading with me to see the truth I refused to acknowledge. And then the darkness enveloped me. You have chosen, the beast intoned, the sound vibrating through my very essence, an ominous resonance that ignited the shadows surrounding me. Just as I thought I was lost, an unnerving clarity surged forth, and I whispered, "Release her." The darkness quivered as a sudden light burst from within me. The threads unraveling around my heart threatened to snap, fraying under the pressure of despair. But as the light flared brighter, the creature recoiled, ripples in the void swallowing pieces of hope whole. Then another shall pay. And just like that, the breath knocked from my lungs as I screamed, the light consuming me, the pain of the choice echoing loud and terrible. As I choked on the ruptured feelings threatening to eclipse my very being, I saw my sister's face once more, now a mask of horror. Then, silence fell as the darkness enveloped everything around, devouring my words, a grim smirk surfacing from the shadows. All that remained a fractured silence, fractured resolution. What had I awakened? With one final push, the feral jaws of the creature snapped shut, yet something worse seemed to rise from the depths of the gloom, an echoing laugh that sent chills down my spine. The weight of responsibility bore down heavily, suffocating in its intensity. "Let the games begin," it whispered, and just then, the realization struck: the shadows would not merely take one of us, they would take all. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the chaos, and my heart dropped as I turned to see an inky figure dragging my sister back into the abyss. I was not just a witness, I was an unwilling player in this twisted game, and as my sister's terrified eyes met mine for one agonizing heartbeat, I understood in that moment, the horrors I had begun to free would pursue me, savagely insatiable, until my own release was ripped from my grasp, and as the darkness surged around, I could feel the boundary between the realms begin to shatter, the choice bearing more weight than I could ever have understood. I wasn't just fighting to save her, I was fighting to save myself from becoming the next casualty of an insatiable hunger that would swallow so much more than just the light. One must fall for many to escape, the shadows sang, and with my heart pounding, I braced myself for what was coming. And then she was gone, swallowed whole, and the laughter erupted from the depths of the haunting abyss, filling my heart with dread as I realized my duty was just beginning. The darkness breathed heavily around me, an insatiable creature feeding on despair, impossibly vast yet intimately close, curling around my limbs with each heartbeat. I staggered backward, my senses overwhelmed, but a pulse of raw instinct drove me forward, deeper into the chilling labyrinth of shadows. I had to confront whatever lay within this dread-laden purgatory. My sister, my only tether to humanity, was lost, sinking further into despair with each heartbeat I squandered. The air thickened, electric with malice, and I found myself paralyzed, caught in a web of lingering memories and phantom whispers, each beckoning me toward another corner of that malevolent veil. The laughter persisted, a twisted melody of subjugation, teasing the very foundation of my sanity. It echoed through the dark recesses of my mind, fueling the sense that I was not alone. Parasitic thoughts clawed at me with haunting entreaties. I could feel them, specters of those who had fallen before, yearning for vengeance and release that had long eluded them. "Help us!" The specters begged, voices like sandpaper scraping raw, pulling my focus from my sister's plight. I squeezed my eyes shut, inhaling the fear laced in the air and grabbing tightly to the fleeting memories of sunlight and laughter. The contrast was stark, it felt like a voiceless scream folded within my chest, not yet realized, but growing sharper, more present. There, within the shadows, I glimpsed movement, a shuffling form draped in a shroud of gloom rising from the depths. The face of a woman emerged, distorted with a rictus grin, and what was once a semblance of humanity had warped into something monstrous. Her eyes, once warm embers, were now cold voids, drawing me in as if glimpsing into an abyss of torment. "Join us," she croaked, voice dripping with venom, the words a haunting incantation. "The choice must be made. For every flicker of light you bring, another soul must give in to the darkness." "No!" I screamed, taking a step back, but the pull was intoxicating. I felt the story of my life unravel, the regret woven seamlessly into my precarious existence. Her pupils fluttered like moths drawn to flame, glinting in the absence of light. "Leave us," I shouted, forcing the words through clenched teeth, adrenaline surging in my veins. "I will find her. I turned, ready to brave deeper loneliness, the wounds of a soul trying to escape the storm of grief encasing me. Yet all around, the darkness coiled thicker, tugging at the fabric of space between breaths. Every inch forward felt laden with 1,000 eyes, watching, judging, waiting. I was a prospective victim, lost among shadows as if my essence were a breadcrumb, a shimmer on the surface of despair. A shriek erupted from the depths, flourishing with hatred, reverberating through the echo chamber of misery, each note tearing through my chest with icy tendrils. The laughter persisted, erupting anew like a virulent storm. The further I ventured, the deeper my entanglement in the web of wrath spun by the creatures of the void. Then I saw at her face again, blending with the mist as if drawn from the very fabric of my despair. Save me. Her lips mouthed, a haunting fragment dissolving into the air. I lunged toward her, heart alight with the fervor of fleeting hope, but the darkness writhed, contorting in laughter or perhaps agony. By saving her, you invoked the screams of the forsaken, the hollow voice echoed deeper still, reverberating up from the chasms beyond. And then, swaths of shadow flung out, clotting the passage between us, more figures rising, each one a grotesque reflection of regret, begging for acknowledgement. You are bound to their suffering, be their savior, or become another sacrifice. Time fell apart, and reality rippled. Their clawed hands reached toward me, their voices overlapping in desperate tunes, blurring the distinction of their shared sorrow. Join us, I fell to my knees, thrumming with dread as intricate vines of grief wound around me like a vice, squeezing tighter. No. I won't succumb. Panic knotted my throat, a primal scream threatening to erupt. I turned, but more figures emerged from the shadows, faces etched with unendurable grief, each one another piece of me I had long tried to bury. Make the choice now. They urged in unison, their desperation drowning out everything but their unified wail, and in that moment, as if time had forgotten me, I felt the fabric of my soul fray, slipping precariously toward perpetual night. The creature's laughter roared, and I knew every heartbeat fractured the boundary. I would have to offer more to keep her safe. Then in the periphery, the shadows broke with a brief flicker of clarity, a path unfurling like forgotten hope. Could I escape this hell? The darkness hissed as I felt the weight of all those who had fallen, consuming me. And then a chilling voice pierced the air, resonating among the echoes, one must fall to awaken the rest. I froze, eyes wide, throat thickening with realization as I felt the shadows tightening around my sister's screams. No. I gasped, one final terror punch drunking through my chest. That in that moment, my choice crystallized, yet my heart splintered, a cruel trick of fate. I bolted forward, plunging deep into the reaching shadows, drawn by the rippling resonance of memories meant to be locked away forever. The edges of despair gleamed, warping every sense of direction as I entered the maw of anguish, and as I did, the shadows roared, "You cannot escape." With my sister's cries spiraling into cacophony, I closed my eyes, feeling the darkness beckon and swallow, knowing fully that this was not the end, it was merely the beginning of a game far more sinister than I could fathom. And just as I plunged beneath the surface, a revelation tore through me, a final chilling realization. The calls I bit into were not simply echoes of the lost, they were a forewarning of a horror that would test the very boundaries of my soul. As the darkness shrouded me, an icy chill crept through my veins as I felt the first tendrils of betrayal coil around my heart. The final thread snapped, and finally, I understood the true horror was not choosing who to save, but realizing that sometimes, the darkness itself would make the choice for you. The murmur of lost souls persisted like distant thunder, resonating through the agonizing depths of the void. The shadows writhed, summoning shapes and forms, grotesque silhouettes that flickered in and out of existence. Each shifting shadow held a piece of agony, a fragment of lives lived and lost, a harbinger of dread gnawing at the edges of my sanity. That I felt a suffocating presence squeezing my chest, a relentless pressure pressing me into the very fabric of this malevolent tapestry. Memories tormented me, visions of laughter and warmth merging into a chilling reminder of what I had lost. But above all, I mustered the echo of my sister's voice, an imprint amid the cacophony, tethering me to hope, even if it felt like grasping at smoke. "Help me!" came her voice again, amplifying from the heart of the darkness, a beacon of despair that drove me forward. I stumbled through the phantasmal tempest, each step met with the chilling scrape of bone and the suffocating breath of the unseen. A flicker of recognition in the hollowed eyes around me drew my focus, a ghostly figure reaching toward me. It was a child, the light of innocence swirling in the void that surrounded her. "You must decide," she whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "You must choose or we all suffer." The urgency in her tone wrapped around my heart like a vice. "What do you mean?" I rasped, feeling every breath scrape against my throat. My thoughts swirled in an agonizing dance, piecing together the fragmented warnings. It became clear, my sister's screams were not alone, they were intertwined, festering wounds pulsing with the agony of countless souls trapped within the abyss, yearning for deliverance or perhaps revenge. Forever is a long time, the child's eyes bored into mine with an unsettling wisdom beyond their years. "They wait for your sacrifice. I won't sacrifice anyone," I cried, my voice breaking with agony. Yet, deep inside, a flicker of doubt ignited a whisper that suggested otherwise. Was it possible that the only escape rested in condemning another? No. The child's cry echoed, twisting into the shadows, summoning a cascade of anguished faces that swarmed closer. "You don't understand. They'll take what you love. They'll tear apart the fabric of your heart." Suddenly, the shadows coalesced, writhing and thickening, rising up in a flurry of shrieks. The air grew heavy, laden with rancid despair, the very taste of loss crawling into my mouth. The figures around me pressed closer, their collective anguish pooling like a dark ocean intent on dragging me under. A piercing scream erupted from the depths, the sound a weapon meant to cleave away sanity. "You'll drown in this abyss." It echoed, clawing at the fragile strands of my resolve. In a frenzied panic, I pulled against the approaching tide, but it felt as if the darkness had teeth razor sharp, biting. As I struggled, memories illuminated by flickering pain danced in my mind, my sister's laughter in the sunlight, her small hand grasping mine as we raced through fields of daisies. Those moments seemed like lifetimes ago, distant yet unbearably close, filling me with an aching urgency to hold on to what remained of their brilliance. But the shadows encroached, thickening like a blanket of despair. More faces emerged, each one a reflection of a soul ensnared, some weeping, others wailing, while a few bore twisted grins, their gnashing teeth revealing another layer of horror. "They will take her if you do not choose." They hissed in unison, their voices reverberating through the choking dark. In that moment of exquisite fear, clarity struck like lightning within the confines of my mind. If I allied with my sister's cries, they would consume her. Yet, if I turned my back, the loss would be mine to bear. My breath quickened as I realized the shadows pulsed with the power to manipulate my emotions, distorting the truth into horrific caricatures of reality. "No," I breathed, feeling the last remnants of certainty drain from my veins. This was a game of silhouettes and lies, but the stakes were reality, the fabric of existence that lived and breathed within me. The child now stood before me, her form flickering like a candle. "Forgive me," I yelled into the dark, realizing the weight of my choice echoed against the crushing silence. "I won't sacrifice you. I will not." The words tumbled from my lips, more a desperate chant than a pledge. But the darkness roared with rage, manifesting as tendrils of shadow curling toward me, desperate to pull me away. And then horror struck as I heard my sister's voice morphing, slicing through the despair-laden air. "You won't leave me." In that instant, the shadows began to twist and tear, pulling apart the veil of darkness to unleash something primal. A figure materialized from the swirling depths, a form clothed in night, radiating a chilling presence that could steal breath with a mere gaze. It was a being that made the darkness bloom like venomous flowers, a manifestation of pure malice. "You made your choice," it whispered, the sound reverberating through the abyss like an unholy lullaby. Panic filled my chest as I tore my gaze away, locking eyes with the engulfing shadows, my sister now trapped within their grasp, her own form dissipating. "No!" I screamed, reaching out as a tidal wave of despair crashed over me. But the darkness shifted, swallowing my cries, leaving me gasping for air in a suffocating void. The weight of my choices bore down upon me as fragments of light began to flicker, tiny beacons caught in the dark, each bearing a fragment of hope, despair, and inescapable truth. Then, with one final exhalation, the shifting shadows screamed, "Now choose." In the midst of my turmoil, dread enveloped me and reverberated around my heart. What lay ahead was not an escape, but an awakening to the horrors that haunted my every breath. The swirling void remained unyielding, the shuddering reminder echoing painfully within me. Sometimes what is saved must witness the decay before darkness claims its rightful price. And just as the last wisps of light flickered into nothingness, a realization gripped me. What if the final choice had already been made, and I was never meant to know who or what would remain? The shadows tightened their hold, grasping at the last strands of clarity in my mind. My heart pounded against the cage of my ribs, the sound echoing like a war drum, each beat marked by the agonizing cries that rose from the void. I was ensnared in a web of despair where time stretched and twisted, leaving me suspended between paralyzing dread and the overwhelming urge to break free. Suddenly, the phantoms released their grasp, and a chilling silence invaded the space. I stood with the child before me, who now wore an expression of deep sorrow, her light dimmed to a flicker, reflecting the encroaching darkness. "You don't understand," she implored, her small hands trembling as she reached toward me. "They thrive on your fear. You must find the heart of the darkness before it finds you." "Where?" I gasped, desperation clawing at the edges of my voice. "Where do I go?" "The corridor of truths lies just beyond," she whispered, glancing nervously at the hollows around us. "But only the brave may enter. What you seek may not be what you desire." With a determined nod, I took a step forward, the air around me thick and electric. The flickering lights in the distance felt like ghostly stars, taunting me with their glimmers of hope as I pressed onward. A path opened, irregular and jagged, narrowing to an archway cloaked in swirling shadows. My call to adventure mingled with trepidation that a foreboding chill rippled through the air as I crossed the threshold. The moment I entered that corridor, I was enveloped in visions that burst forth like a fever dream, a cyclone of memories and fears. Faces of the lost surged around me, each look filled with profound longing and unfulfilled whispers, their mouths moving soundlessly, revealing truths that were buried deep within, secrets only this darkness knew. "Save us!" they implored, echoes reverberating against the walls. The child's warning returned to me, "Only the brave may enter." My pulse quickened. What did that even mean? Did it imply bravery in facing the horrors of my past, or merely a gamble against an ominous force far beyond my understanding? Struggling to maintain my footing, I pressed deeper into the corridor. Muffled cries grew louder, morphing into a cacophony that overwhelmed my senses. Each step became a fight against panic, shadows swirling with malevolent intention, threatening to pull me into their depths. Suddenly, a door loomed ahead, glimmering ominously with an unnatural light that spilled into the corridor, illuminating a stark contrast to the consuming darkness surrounding it. The handle was cold as death beneath my fingers, and as I turned it, the door creaked open, granting access to a room swirling in shades of black and crimson. Inside, grotesque paintings adorned the walls, images of grief, pain, and inevitable death. Their colors stirred up memories long buried, visions of my life before this torment, painted with such raw emotion I could almost feel the warmth of the past imploding in the icy chill of the room. "To live is to understand loss," a low voice resonated from the shadows. I turned, heart hammering wildly, to face a figure cloaked in darkness. Its eyes glowed, twin orbs of sorrow seeping with the anguish of the many who had walked this path before me. "You are not the first to seek truth here, and you certainly will not be the last. What do you want from me?" I murmured, dread creeping into my bones. "The price of truth is never free," the voice intoned. "Are you willing to pay?" Terror gnawed at the fringes of my sanity. "What do you take in exchange?" "There is always a balance to be struck, a life for a life, a fate for a fate. One shall be lost to free another." The voice echoed through the chaos, tugging at the thread of hesitance weaving through my heart. In that moment, time folded in on itself as I envisioned my sister, her laughter now a haunting melody entwined with despair. If I made the ultimate sacrifice, could I save her? Was the truth worth the cost, even if it meant losing everything? As I struggled to come to terms with the horror laid bare before me, the darkness slithered closer, threatening to pull me back into its depths. And just then, with ethereal calm, the spectre brought forth an object from the void, a mirror, so polished that it reflected not just my visage but the specters of my memories behind me, a kaleidoscope of tortured souls whose eyes bore witness to my decision. The air thickened as I sensed the darkness breathing behind me, growing impatient, hungry for the sacrifice it craved. Just as I reached for the mirror, a shattering scream pierced the air, followed by silence. Something shifted, the shadows recoiling momentarily as if awaiting my command. Panic surged within me, and in the fraught instant before I decided, I felt the tremor of a hand gripping my shoulder, a familiar warmth. I turned, breath hitching, as I found my sister standing there, pale and ethereal, a look of mourning etched into her features. "Please, don't," she whispered, her voice trembling like a flickering candle. "You can't trust them." And with the weight of that dreadful moment hanging heavy in the air, the mirror cracked open, unleashing a torrent of visions, horrific truths revealed, and a chilling laughter echoed through the room as shadows twisted, reaching for us both. Who would I lose? Who would I save? And amidst the screams of lost souls demanding retribution, a decision hung, teetering on the precipice of the unthinkable. Then darkness fell like a shroud, and everything spiraled into a soul-chilling oblivion. Just as I clutched my sister's hand, I knew what lay ahead deserved no reader's imagination, for the true horror of my fate had yet to be unveiled. I stood at the edge of the abyss, my heartbeat echoing through the palpable silence that surrounded me. My sister's frightened face haunted my thoughts like a shadow, and dread twisted into nausea as I realized the full weight of my predicament. I had been drawn into this labyrinthine nightmare, faced with the terror of choices and consequences that left scars deeper than the darkness itself. "Don't listen to it." My sister's voice pierced the thick air, pulling me back from the precipice. Fear laced her words, reverberating with urgency. "They want to break you." But the whispers of the entity tugged at me, seductive promises woven through threads of despair. "You must choose one life for another, a sacrifice that will tip the balance of this realm." The shadows surged, a tide of longing and desperation pulling at the frayed edges of my sanity. I saw faces winding through the murk, each one a memory begging for recognition. Fleeting glimpses of the lost, tortured souls caught in the web of the forgotten, melded into tortured reflections of their former selves. The weight of their collective sorrow enveloped me like a heavy shroud, each visage pulling on the strings of my heart. The mirror shimmered ominously, fracturing light into 1,000 unsettling shards. Images swirled within, moments from my past crashing down like tidal waves. My sister's laughter, bright and innocent, was juxtaposed against the stark reality of loss, weighed against the backdrop of torment that lay ahead. I could feel the tether between us fraying, the very fabric of our bond stretching to its limits. The choice was mine, but the air crackled with a tension that left me lightheaded. As my fingers brushed across the mirror's surface, I found myself flung into a whirlwind of memories. The day my sister had decided to follow her dreams, leaving our small town behind, the elation tinted with unjustifiable guilt that had begun the cycle of her descent. Each fragment was a reminder of the moments I had drowned in my selfish decisions, the chances I had squandered, the cries I failed to heed. "You can save her," the entity's voice slithered into my consciousness, wrapping around my thoughts like ivy. "All you have to do is take her place." But I could feel her presence beside me. I would not offer her light as a sacrifice. "No," I breathed, the word trembling on my lips. "I won't let you take her. I would rather endure the darkness." The shadows writhed with rage, twisting violently as the floor beneath me quaked, the throne of despair shifting underfoot. The eyes of the lost bore into my soul, yet I stood firm, defiant against the chaos. I felt the raw energy of the pleading voices intermix with my own heartbeat, pushing me forward, coaxing me to venture deeper into the labyrinth of my choices. And then, the veiled truth burst forth in a blistering flash, illuminating the crux of the horror. The entity revealed itself, a figure cloaked in despair, its face obscured yet bearing a maddening familiarity. I recoiled. I stammered, recognition tearing through my frazzled mind. This was me, the fractured pieces of my being, entwined in the darkness I had sought to contain. All you've lost, all you've given up, the choices that have haunted you, it grinned, revealing teeth sharp as broken dreams, you have become a vessel of sacrifice. Panic gripped my chest. All this was the price of salvation. I've sacrificed nothing. I screamed, desperation lacing my words. Ah, but the truth is a bitter potion, it hissed, words dripping with contempt. You chose to abandon those you loved, but now it is time to pay your debt. One life must be lost for another, or all will remain ensnared forever. The walls of the chamber began to close in, pulsating with an energy that felt like the heartbeat of the abyss itself. The souls cried out, their lament forming a symphony of despair that rattled my resolve. I turned to my sister, her expression one of fear, yet something more profound, a deep-seated understanding of the choice laid bare before me. Her eyes shimmered with tears, her voice raw. With emotion, "You can't save me, I won't let you. Don't say that." I reached for her, but the shadows shifted, obscuring our connection. "Please, don't," but the darkness loomed heavier, forcing me to confront the reality I had been avoiding. In that moment, I realized that the creature before me wasn't merely the embodiment of my guilt, it was a reflection of my unyielding fear, the fear that hadn't just shaped my life but had led us both to this precipice. She is the sacrifice. The entity bellowed, and in an instant, a wave of darkness crashed over us, ripping through our connection like a violent storm. I could feel their anguish clawing at the raw edges of my existence, a penetrating darkness rooted deep within my very soul. "I won't let you take her," I shouted, feeling the metaphysical chains of despair attempting to bind us. But my sister turned, the resolute strength surging in her voice that surged through the fractured walls of my mind. "You must choose me. It's the only way." I felt the ground shaking as the shadows writhed around me, an ominous presence teasing the edges of my consciousness. "Join us or lose everything," the entity echoed, the shadows at its feet swirling with gleeful malice. "No," I gasped, a sudden clarity focusing my thoughts. "I won't succumb to the shadows. I won't lose you." I grasped the mirror with both hands, looking past the swirling reflections of doom and despair, searching for hope among the chaos. And in the flicker of despair-filled eyes, I saw something, every choice, every regret woven into the fabric of my being, mingling with the light, urging me to fight back. That in an act of defiance, I hurled the mirror against the ground. "You think you can take her from me?" I roared, shattering the illusion of sacrifice. Light erupted, illuminating the chamber as shards of the mirror reflected the shadows back, scattering them into the ether, but as the light swelled, I felt it a pull, a binding tether linking me to the abyss. A choice loomed over us, and suddenly, the ground split wide open beneath our feet. "No!" my sister screamed, reaching for me as the shadows snared her, dragging her back toward the gaping maw of despair. "Let her go!" I cried, but the entity reveled in our terror, tightening its grip. The darkness swelled, ready to consume, but I saw my sister's face amidst the chaos, caught in the vortex of cries echoing throughout. "Fight!" she cried, her voice a beacon in the darkness. And as the shadows tightened their relentless grip, I understood the true horror lay not in the choice of sacrifice, but the bonds we forged in the light. My sister was not just a soul ensnared, she was my heart, my tether, the very essence I had cherished. Not just my responsibility, but my hope. That in a final act of desperation, I lunged forward, and as I dived into the shadows, all the pieces of my fractured self converged. Together. I screamed, plunging into the heart of the darkness that sought to claim us both. The faces, the lost, the desperate, the forsaken, they filled the air, their cries merging into a singular sound as they echoed through the tumult. And within them, a singular choice emerged, not sacrifice, but unity. With one final push, we surged as one against the darkness, and light burst forth from our shared memories, dispelling the shadows that had sought to consume us. That in that moment, an inexplicable silence fell, and I found myself standing before my sister, our hands clasped tightly, as the remnants of the darkness ebbed away like smoke. The shadows receded with reluctant screams, leaving us breathless in the aftermath. But even as peace settled around us, a chilling realization crept into the fragile silence. The shadows lingered, waiting, hiding in the unseen corners of the reality just beyond. We had survived the true horror of our choices, but the darkness had merely shifted. The aching memory of our confrontation loomed like a distant specter, a reminder of the haunting truth that would never fully recede. As we stood beside each other, gazing into the remnants of a past touching the edge of oblivion, one chilling whisper echoed in the air, haunting yet familiar, "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." And with that echo ringing in my ears, I felt a cold shiver snake its way down my spine, for I knew that even in our victory, the shadows would always mirror our darkest truths, waiting patiently for the moment we would falter again. The horror that lurked within us had been awakened, and it would never truly let go.